Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone, depending where you're joining from. And welcome to our webinar, From Dashboards to Action, the Rise of Agentic GRC. So first and foremost, I want to thank you for spending this hour with us. My name is Marcio Morbach, and I lead Demand Gen at Scrut, and I'll be moderating today's session. The reason we wanted to host this conversation is very, very simple. If you work in GRC, security, or compliance, you've probably had this experience. Your dashboards are full of gaps, yet the actual work of fixing all of the problems that you have still lands on someone's plate manually. Visibility was the main challenge for all of us about 10 years ago, but today we're facing many challenges with execution. That's what the conversation is going to be all about. We're going to unpack what's actually behind that bottleneck. We're going to walk through a practical framework for thinking about GRC automation maturity and have an honest conversation about what it takes to trust AI agents with the real compliance work. So let me give you a few quick housekeeping items before we dive right in. As always, the session is being recorded, so we're going to send you a replay and any resources we share afterwards. We've got a couple of live posts coming up, so please keep an eye out for those and make sure that you participate. And if you have any questions throughout the session, drop them in the Q&A panel, and we get to as many of these questions as we can at the end. So let me introduce the amazing panel we have today. We've got a really sharp group. First up, Roz Halayuk. Roz is a security product leader, and he'll also be co-moderating with me today. So you hear from him throughout. Roz brings a deeply product-oriented lens to how security and compliance tooling should actually work. We also have Maurici Leszkowicz, who is head of IT risk and compliance at Mailmetrics. Maurici lives this work day to day, running a real GRC program. So he brings the operator's perspective that keeps the rest of us really honest in the session. And we also have Kevin Xu, who is a security and InfoSec leader who spent years building and scaling security programs. Kevin's going to bring us that cross-functional lens on where compliance workflows intersect with engineering and ops. And last but not least, we have Ayush Chowdhury, who is the CEO and co-founder of Scrut Automation. Ayush has been building toward this shift from systems of record to systems of action, so he'll bring the product and architecture perspective to the session. Again, I just want to make sure that I thank you all for being here, so let's get right into it. So our first section, it's about the dashboard of broken things. And here's something I bet a lot of you have felt. You open your GRC platform on a Monday morning and it's all red. Failing controls, stale evidence, open risks. You can see everything that's wrong. Visibility is clearly not the issue here. But closing those gaps, that's still on someone. That's still very manual. That's still very slow. And that gap between what your platform can see and what your team can actually close, that's what we're calling execution debt. And it's what I really want to get into. So let me bring the panel in here. Kevin, let's make this real for a second. What does execution debt actually look like inside of a program you've run or a program you've worked with? What's the stuff that you think stays really manual, even when you got a GRC platform in place? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's a few things I can think of across all the various companies I've worked at. One is vulnerability management. And so a lot of us in our policies, we have things such as criticals must be fixed in 24 hours, highs must be fixed in 7. But when you're a cloud native company, you have a lot of open source software. This becomes pretty hard to manage. And so you get these scanners that say, hey, you have all these violations of your SLA. And then you try to have your internal folks patch things with you, and it's not always that easy. There are other things that even like not from a super technical standpoint, such as policy acceptance. So a lot of us have these GRC automation tools, but then you have the fun task of getting all of your employees to agree to your policy updates every year, right? Like, sure, you can automate the Slack kind of pokes for them, you can automate the emails. But end of the day, if your colleagues aren't hitting the accept button, you're still not getting that automated. And so I think when people see the term GRC automation, they think that there's no work that needs to be done when in reality, there's a lot of things that you can speed up, but there's always going to be parts that are a little tedious, such as some of the stuff I just talked about.
So cross-team coordination overhead seems to be an issue, right? Do you see compliance teams pinging engineering, engineering pushing back, and then nothing moving until someone escalates?
Yeah, all the time, because end of the day, the business is usually there to make money. And so a lot of engineers, their primary goal is to release features. And so if you tell them things like, hey, we need you to spend 10% of your week updating things and looking at scanner output, a lot of them are going to say, well, this doesn't help me with my performance review. Our product manager is giving us all these things to do. Sorry, but this just has to wait. And so it's always a tricky balance to figure out what's actually best for the company.
That's great. Ross, you've seen this from the product side across a lot of organizations. Do you think this is a cultural problem where some of the teams are treating compliance as a periodic event? Or is it really operational, where the systems themselves just aren't built for this continuous level of execution? What do you think?
Look, I think the honest answer is that it's a bit of both. And the reality is that the reason why it is both is because think back to the time when all the GRC work was always manual. Think back to that time and think what did the reality of the people of the security practitioners at the time look like. And in my view, it really comes down to the fact that every time you identify a misconfiguration, every time you identify a compliance gap, you have to spend hours and hours and hours fixing it. And so obviously it made sense to just batch those fixes and say, you know what, we don't have enough resources to spend weeks and months of our time continuously checking misconfigurations, continuously addressing GRC gaps. So let's just batch it. Let's do this once per quarter, and then we are done until the next time when we have to do this again. The tooling evolved. I think slowly we got to the point where the tooling now exists for people to be able to do it continuously, but the culture of periodic reviews is really hard to change, right? Because people got used to it, and it's convenient, and it's something that we've always done. And so now, even now, I feel like for the very first time, the tooling is almost ahead of the culture.
Yeah, I think the main issue that I see from what you're stating now is that if we treat compliance as a quarterly or annual event, that we're really not, baking into our productivity systems. We're basically creating all of the conditions for this execution that to accumulate between the cycles. Uh, Maurizio, when you see the platforms for GRC, a lot of these platforms are good for showing you the red indicator, but they're not great at routing a lot of the work. Do you see that in your organization, and how are you training your team? How are you working with your team to start fixing that as you work through your compliance cycles?
So from the perspective of the GRC platform manager, there's always, whenever we talk about what kind of tooling or what kind of filters we could use, there's always, for me, what problems are we solving, right? What problems is this tool is going to solve me? So what I'm interested in when I'm looking at those tools, it's walk me through the exact process, how and what kind of problems are you solving me. So for example, with the AI, it for me, it would be, are you able to solve me the critical vulnerability that it's gonna show up on Friday evening at 6 p.m. and does it gonna land in the engineering team on Monday morning without my intervention, right? So that if we are going to be able to solve this problem with the AI agent, then that's really solving the problem. Because at the end of the day, I don't want to be. I'm looking at those tools, and if there's an AI agent, I'm looking to solve the problems, not manually still walking through the steps of registering the ticket, making sure that the engineer gets notified, making sure that that I read this report. So if we can save that some of those steps, then that would be something that I would look at. Look at the demo exactly and walk me through how you solving my problem with the vulnerability example, or registering the risk and creating tickets automatically without my intervention.
Awesome. Ayush, just to close this section, as somebody that's working on architecture for product and really thinking about products all the time, why do you think from the get-go, a lot of the GRC tooling was architected for visibility rather than follow through, meaning a system of action? What are some of the things that went into that to that thought process?
A lot of this tooling, it's supposed to solve problems, right? And it shouldn't be really another layer. But another important element is we need to look at this tooling and see our organization and the level of maturity of our organization. I think this is something that is sometimes missing, because I had that experience when working for the very small organization, where the GRC tool really does the job, really gets you 70% of the jobs, of the task done. You feel comfortable explaining to the auditor, your client, showing the dashboard. But when you're working for a 500 plus organization, you have a difficulty explaining to the auditor your dashboard, because you see a lot of tasks not being completed because of dependencies in the organization, right?
Yeah.
So this could be another element that could be brought into play when evaluating those AI agents and GRC tool as a whole.
Ayush, so and follow up on what Maurizi just said. Why do you think these GRC tools were originally architected for visibility instead of becoming a system of action? What do you think, Ayush?
The way GRC has evolved over the last couple of decades, RCO GRC was traditionally something that large enterprises would typically concern themselves with, and therefore, and this was GRC in a very horizontal sense, where it was just not IT and cyber related GRC, but a lot of horizontal elements like SOX, ESG, operational, financial GRC as well. There, in a large enterprise context, think about a 20,000, 30,000 people bank. The problem was really about visibility and how do we create a system of record? How do we get everything together? There's information lying at various places in the organization. How do we put it all together in a manner where the auditors can consume it? There's provenance. What has happened over the last, I would say, less than a decade is that more mid-size, tech-focused or tech-forward companies that are cloud native are also now concerning themselves with GRC as a problem. That's just how the market has evolved, because large enterprise customers today are a lot, and this is just one example, but large enterprise customers are a lot more amenable today, if you will, to work with smaller or more mid-sized challenger companies. But then they also expect them to be responsible with their data, have hygiene, security practices in place. And so the need for GRC has trickled down to these flavor of companies as well, if you will. Now, what they need out of their GRC tool or any tool in general is more actionability, because the problem really is I have a very small team, and the strength and the size of my team is often disproportionate to the amount of GRC workload, a compliance and risk management workload that I have to handle. So how does my tool bridge the gap? How does my tool not just stop at visibility but give me actionable stuff? It prioritizes things for me while also maintaining the basic principles around provenance and auditor friendliness, which is why, and also with a lot of companies that we work with, these are all mid-size tech forward companies or early enterprise companies with small teams. GRC is a lot closer to security, which means that the problem is really about I have a ton of data. It's a lot more data back, but how do I prioritize? How do I make sense of it? How do I identify exactly what needs to happen? How do I orchestrate across multiple teams, the DevOps engineers, the developers? And therefore, given the fact that the nature of GRC itself has shifted as the ICP or the target group has changed, I think the problem has naturally shifted from mere visibility to how do we build more action.
Got it. Got it. And I really think that what's coming through here is that we no longer have a visibility gap, right? I think it's pretty well established that there isn't a true visibility gap anymore. It's really an execution gap, right? Now that we have all of these, red alerts polluting our screens, like what we're going to do about these issues. And I think that's fundamentally a different problem to solve. And that actually sets up the next part of our conversation perfectly. It really brings in a perfect segue. So, but before we go further, I want to get a quick pulse on where everyone is at. So we've got a poll coming up, and let's see here. There will be a poll popping up right now, and the poll is which stage best matches how your organization handles GRC today, right? Option one, mostly manual and spreadsheet driven. Centralized in a platform, but still heavily human driven, using some AI automation for support tasks. Starting to automate, not very sure. We'll give you about a minute to answer to the poll, and we'll take a quick look at the results. So let's answer up. And so everybody knows, right? The host and the panelists cannot vote. Let's be explicit about that.
I tried. It didn't work.
I tried. I just started pushing the button here. Like
I
the
saw that
GRC
the AI will
workflows in
do
the
it for
marketing
me, but
in the marketing department. What's going on with me? Wow. So look at that. The results are that 56% of our audience is saying that their GRC automation levels is that a lot of it is centralized in a platform, but still heavily human driven, right? It's a lot of what we discussed. The second one is mostly manual and spreadsheet driven. So I think the second part of this webinar is going to talk about readiness, right? I really want everybody to start thinking about the levels of GRC automation as a way of kind of assessing where they are. And we've put together a very simple framework for you to start thinking about this. And we here at Scrut call it the 4 levels of GRC automation. This isn't, for you to self-evaluate in a bad, in a pejorative way. It's really for you to think about, okay, I'm here, and there are other things and there are other levels that I could be thinking about around automation. And level 0, everything is manual. Level 1, you've got a platform that centralizes your controls, evidence, and tasks, but execution is still human-driven. A lot of us, according to the poll, are exactly there. Level 2, AI is in the picture. It can draft, it can summarize, it can assist, but it doesn't take action. And then finally, level 3, AI can execute the workflows on your behalf, but we got to put some guardrails and keep the humans in the loop, right? Build in some approval so the humans are staying in the loop. Ayush, I want to start with you. For the thousands of organizations that we have worked with recently, where do you think most of them actually sit on this spectrum? Are they most at level 1 trying to get to level 2? Are you seeing teams that are already pushing into that level 3 territory? What do you see with our clients as you're thinking about these 4 levels of automation?
Level 1 being the bottommost, right, which is purely manual, and level 4 being system of action. That's the increasing order
Correct.
of the level nomenclature, right? Okay, got it. I think
Correct.
yeah. So I would say most of our the answer has evolved heavily, by the way, over the last 12 months, Marcio, as AI has become more mainstream. I would say if you'd asked me this question 12 months ago, I would have said that most of a disproportionately high number of organizations that we work with would lie somewhere between or somewhere close to level 1 and level 2, where either it was completely manual or there was a system of record which was pieced together on a Google Drive folder or multiple spreadsheets that were joined together through index tables. So with a very strong inclination to move from level 1 to level 2. That was a primary driver behind why a lot of companies would evaluate a GRC tool in the first place, us included, and anybody else, right? Over the last few months, however, we've seen an increasing interest for both our existing customers as well as our prospects that we speak to. There is a lot of curiosity around level 3, where I think, and this manifests in a variety of flavors. It manifests in uh, our existing customers unlocking the agentic capabilities on the platform, our existing customers using information on Scrut and using Scrut's MCP server to access it through ChatGPT or the Claude interface. It manifests in a variety of flavors, uh, but we're seeing a very clear transition happen from level 2 to level 3 over the last few months, and that's really accelerated. And also, I think it's there is also a general sense of comfort and familiarity with using agents as and not just in the context of GRC, but in the context of other tools as well, which is also what is driving user behavior towards some degree of level 3. I think with level 4, I would say, as an industry, as a category, uh, we are very strongly progressing in that direction, but there are certain hygiene parts that need to be in place. Provenance is very important. Reliability is very important. The user being able to choose what level of autonomy to offer to agents is important. RBAC is important, right? Your agents at any point of time should not be any more overprivileged than the users, the specific user that they represent, because then there's a violation. And these building blocks are important engineering challenges that we love solving, honestly, because that's what makes level 4 successful. And again, I'm normalized from my bias here because we're heavily obsessed about level 4. But I think the short answer to your question, Marcio, is that a year ago there was a lot of level 1 and level 2. Over the last few months, we are seeing a very strong progression in intent uh, within our customer base and also our prospects to transition towards level 3. Uh, and I think we are a few months away from, as an industry, we are a few months away from uh, completely transitioning to level 4 from the demand side. I think the constraint is really about uh, users feeling comfortable that there are the right security and privacy guardrails in place. There's reliability, there's provenance, there's traceability. So yeah, that's our assessment.
Got it. Maurizio, so I want to flip this to you quickly. I think a lot of the choices around GRC platforms and how to integrate AI, I'm 100% sure that these are conversations that you're having with other peers. And if another GRC leader who's evaluating tools right now, who is really concerned about their level of productivity and making things work, they are researching different solutions, and every single vendor is telling them, AI, AI, AI. What would be the advice that you would give them in regards to how to apply, a filter to say, hey, this is how you should be thinking about AI in the context of the work that we're doing today. What's really the advice that you would give someone in that situation? What do you think?
So from my perspective, it should be always like I think I briefly mentioned that already. What kind of problem is AI really solving to my organization? And uh, also, as a GRC leader, I'm also responsible for talking to clients. And if my team and if you, for example, you're in the regulated sector, you need to be really cautious about what you say to the regulated industry clients because they are very risk averse. And when they hear AI and when they hear that the AI may actually process their data, they are very skeptical about that. So what you want to do, you just want to make sure first that you set some guardrails that Ayush already mentioned. You want to be able to freely be able to know where that data and what it's being actually processed by AI agent with that GRC tool. So when you're talking to the client, when you're talking to the internal stakeholders with the security teams, you want to be able to know the answers to the question. Where exactly that data it's being processed, and what are the guardrails? Is there a kill switch, for example? Can I stop the AI automatically because there may be incident or anything like that? So these are the type of questions that I think internal teams that I'm hearing from my internal teams and the clients, and I need to have the answers for them.
I think it's incredible that you say that, because then we're moving the discussion away from an issue of productivity, but and now we're talking about how AI is functioning, right? So it's a bolt-on to the GRC platform. And what are the guardrails from a data security perspective that you have to manage in the context of allowing the agents to perform the work? That's really insightful. Um, Kevin, is there a signal here? Is there a time or something that kind of tells you, hey, it's time to really think about automation. It's time to let the agents do some of the work. And in the context of what Maurizio said, um, what are some of the other things that we should take into consideration as we are allowing agents to take over that folks may not be thinking about in the session?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, in terms of GRC, a lot of us who have these GRC automation platforms, we have some form of knowledge base where we have internal answers. And one of the tricky parts of having any sort of knowledge base is maintaining them, making sure they're up to date. One of like the original ways you would do this is for every kind of question answer pair that you might have for your questionnaires, you might say, set a reminder for the question owner to review in a year. And so over time, as you have lots and lots of these questions, and if people are constantly getting pinged to say, hey, does this still look right? It's all going to be noise, and they're just going to hit yes, 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 yes. What I think there's an opportunity to do with AI is for some of these knowledge-based things, if there's like a new Notion article or if there's like a new product release, it'd be good to have some agent kind of summarize what changed, maybe look through your knowledge base and potentially point out things that may no longer be accurate. And so that's not super high stakes compared to some of the other things where we're concerned about, but it probably is like a good use of using AI for something very tedious that people are doing on a repetitive basis. And I think that's where people will start to like trust and rely on AI more, or kind of like these not low impact, but smaller tasks that if something does go wrong or if something's missed, it's really not the end of the world. But
That makes total sense. Ross, if a team is trying to move from the AI kind of on the side that merely advises them to AI that will help them execute and get, its hands a little dirtier, what's the biggest mistake a team can make? Do you have any advice for any organizations trying to make that switch?
I really feel like, at least based on what I see, the biggest mistake that people make is guiding their decisions based on where the AI was and how they thought of AI like a year or two ago. Like back then, AI was primarily seen as this like guiding advisory layer, like a tool that companies and teams would use to summarize, maybe get some recommendations and really accelerate their understanding of what's happening in their environment. And I think that up until today, a lot of the companies are still, like a lot of the customers are still stuck in that mindset where they go back to the time where maybe a year or two ago they tried some tool and it wasn't quite there. It looked like a better dashboard. So I feel like the biggest mistake is really that limiting mindset that a lot of the organizations are still dealing with. So obviously some are able to move past that, but others really require that shift in rethinking AI as a system, like as a part of the governed system of action instead of just layer of insight. Like I see even people who They say that they're starting to get ready to use more and more of that decision making in their environment, but even they oftentimes ask, how can AI help us make better decisions, instead of asking how can it do the work for us so that our people can review their work and then approve it. I think the biggest shift and the biggest mistake comes down to the mindset that organizations go in with. And then the other bit is picking the right partners. I feel like we live in the world where there has like a GRC market is incredibly competitive, and there is a number of players out there that have existed for a long while, that have built their products many years ago, and that have been quite fortunate and quite smart to layer on different sprinkles and bits and pieces of AI into their pretty robust, and I would say like even legacy solutions. So I think a lot of the mistakes also come down to the fact that it does require a bit of digging to understand who actually does what, and prospects do have to go past some surface level questions to peel back that onion and to understand, is this company truly embracing AI as that enabler for automation and those higher level decision making, or is this really still a bolt on masquerading as that like system of action?
It's really interesting because I think about that even in the context of my work, right? Because you think of work that you're going to do in marketing, work that you're going to do in GRC, in finance. We're seeing AI as kind of a co-pilot, right? And that's kind of the original adoption of AI. I was blessed enough to see the very early versions of what AI looked like maybe 4 or 5 years ago and how it evolved. And I think one of the most important evolutions that we need to really pay attention to is that now it is no longer a co-pilot, it's actually a partner, right? So you can offload work and trust it, giving it the proper guardrails. You can trust it to do some of that work on your behalf, right? But that's I think all of the advice in this section was fantastic because everybody that's really thinking about moving from AI that just informs the work and really works as a co-pilot to AI that helps you execute something, anything, right? The real question stops being like, is this, impressive enough? And really becomes, can I trust AI to do the right work? And that will take us directly into the next section of the session, and that's really about operationalizing trust in Agentic GRC. So we'll take another minute to run through another poll, and that poll should be popping up on your screen right now. So let's see it come up. Fantastic. So I'll just read it quickly. What's the biggest thing holding you back from using AI agents in your compliance workflows? Agents taking actions without proper human approval, not being able to explain to an auditor what the agent did and why. That's interesting. Losing visibility into who's accountable when something goes wrong. Or I think a lot of organizations have this issue, leadership or team buy-in isn't there yet, right? So please vote. We'll take a minute to do that. Against Roz, I'm trying to vote. They're trying to vote. Try to vote again. I saw you was trying to vote too.
Some people probably want to pick all four.
I was
Let's
going
just
to say
go
the
for
same thing. I think I would pick
Is
all
it is it
four
a
because
is it an
there
all you
are.
can eat answer? You just pick all of. Oh, you see? Oh, you guys were right. Much
There's an
more
even spread.
even. On
Yes.
Oh, there you go. There you go. So leadership buy-in and the agents taking action without proper human approval. Those are the ones that got it. That's fantastic. But you're right. Maybe you want to select all four. You're absolutely right. So uh, I think we've been talking about getting work done with AI and how AI can function. I think that there's a question that already came up, and it's a question that I want to kind of poke around a little bit, which is what happens when the agent breaks something, right? And I think as you're thinking about GRC, that's really the right question. I believe, and I think we believe that the barrier to agentic GRC isn't really curiosity. I think everybody here can agree that we're all really excited about what's coming. But I think the question is really about trust, right? The barrier to adoption is really trust. Um, and I think a lot of the people on the session are asking themselves, can I actually trust the agent to carry on work on my behalf and have the outcome be safe and auditable? That really is the $1 million question here. So Roz, I'll start with you. Let's start with a fear that people are feeling about this issue. In your opinion, what is the worst case scenario people are worried about when we talk about agents touching compliance workflows? Is that fear legitimate or not? What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, look, the fear is very real, and honestly, I think it's completely rational, right? When people hear agents executing compliance workflows, they can immediately think about losing control. Like, oh, this agent is making some irreversible change in production, or maybe sending incorrect information to an auditor or to a vendor, or maybe taking actions based on some parameters that it hallucinated, and that could lead to a failed audit. There is also a fear of this, like the busy fool's risk, where agents are essentially retrying actions endlessly, spamming different systems, and even locking accounts. And we've read, like, we've heard a ton of stories about how it happened in other domains. So when something happens, people wonder, like, can we clearly show who approved a certain decision, why it was done, and who was responsible? And I think that the key point here is that none of those are the reasons to avoid agents. They're really the design requirements for the GRC platforms that are leveraging agents. So the right way to approach this is not to rely on autonomous execution, it is to rely on governed execution. It's to make sure that every single agent will operate within strict guardrails enforced by the system, and the human approval is going to be required where it's needed. So the system needs to make sure that there are full audit trails. There's clear boundaries of what the agent can and cannot do. Like, every action has to be auditable, every action has to be reversible, and every action has to be attributed to the entity that makes that action. So companies that get this right, they don't just eliminate risk. They make it possible to truly scale the expertise in a way that wasn't possible before. And I think those fears, in a way, they shouldn't prevent us from experimenting and from actually embracing agentic automation. They should force us to ask questions of the vendors that we consider partnering with, to understand how are they prepared to handle different scenarios that will inevitably come up. And if they are, embrace it.
I think a lot of it goes back to this issue of blurred accountability, right? If the agent did it, like, who is responsible when something goes wrong, right? And what we see uh, here at Scrud is that one model that's continuously coming up is this approval or pull request model, right? And the idea is very simple. The agent does the work and moves it forward, but a human reviews and approves the work before anything goes live, right? So the ever famous human in the loop model. Ayush, I think you've lost a lot of sleep thinking about this. So I'll ask you this question. How do you envision a platform actually making AI trustworthy enough that people are comfortable letting it do real work? What are your thoughts on that?
So there are a few design principles that we consider sacred, and this is the mental model that we use to think about how agents can be trusted to do work and not just surface information, right? So a and this is in no particular order of importance, but all of them are equally important for us. One is the the user should have control on the extent of autonomy that they want to provide an agent with
Got it.
at any point of time, because it's really up to the user to decide how much autonomy they present, how can they trust it. Second, for we when we talk about breaking changes, right? So that not all changes have the same level of impact. If you automatically approve a PR that has slop in it, so agents are always going to be non-deterministic by nature. But if you approve a PR that has slop in it, that can have breaking changes. If you approve, if an agent carries out an action autonomously where rogue notifications go out in a blast to multiple vendors or multiple employees, it'll have a cross-cutting impact. But can agents be trusted to uh, uh, but if it's a if an agent creates a duplicate Jira ticket, it won't create a breaking change, it will create overhead, right? So overheads and breaking changes are not at the same level. So I think it's very important to classify where the rogue action could occur and what is going to be the consequence of the rogue action, and take preemptive guardrails, as Ross mentioned, to make sure they don't occur, and also cap the extent of autonomy in certain cases where the changes could be very breaking in nature, right? And then the organization is to recover from it. The other thing that's really sacred for us is making sure that even if agents are provided autonomy, even if agents are carrying out high volume but low criticality tasks like deduplicating Jira tickets, evaluating vendor responses, sending out questionnaires which are heavily tailored to the nature of exposure that a company has with the vendor, every action is auditable. Even if initially an agent does make a mistake, sure, that can happen, but it should not make the same mistake again. So when you build telemetry around that kind of a product use case, it is very important to measure how many times a past error that was actually corrected and uploaded to the agent's skill file is repeated, because they should not be repeated. That's like a cardinal mistake. It should improve over time, right? So I think the way companies thought about telemetry in the CRUD era, where we talked about sessions, logins, activities in the platform, that also has to be thought through differently, because when agents are doing the work, quite often people are actually not logging into the platform to carry out actions or sessions. Agents are doing stuff in the background, but every action needs to be logged. The number of times an agent continued to make a mistake that was earlier corrected, that needs to be logged. The number of times there was a follow through, the number of times the loop was actually closed into something meaningful, the number of times there was a state change that was correct, everything needs to be logged, so that over time, with every action, with every journey, the reliability improves. But that's also an opportunity for vendors and product owners in general to create a lot of stickiness, because by the time you get to year 3.
Got it. Thank you, Ayush. So let me bring Maurizio and Kevin into this final question here for this section. So where is the right line? I'll start with you, Kevin. So where's the right line between the work that the agent can prepare, right, and the work that a human must approve, right? I think I usually talked about there's some low effort, repetitive work that the agents can do that may not require somebody to intervene. But where do you think the boundary lies? Are there categories of actions that should always stay human owned, no matter how good the automation gets? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if off the top of my head I have good examples, but one philosophy that I think is a good one to take is, let's say your company did have some sort of data breach and things started to come out about your internal processes and things like that. And I feel like if there was some task that, if like it had gone wrong and there was a breach and then someone started to investigate, and if they started questioning you on, well, this is like a really important thing, like why would you allow someone not experienced or not an agent to do it? That's probably like the direction I would move in. If it's something like uh it's like someone missed like a security awareness training by a day and you had some AI agent do the poking to remind them, like that's not something that would be a big deal if customers found out. But if it was something such as you had an agent go in and verify that MFA was on for like your root account, like if someone found out that that had gone wrong and a human wasn't looking at that, then you might start to go, maybe that one, just to be on the safe side, we should have a human check. It's kind of like a gut check that if it were to go wrong, you should probably like have a human look at it. Otherwise, people would be really upset at you. That's kind of how I would think about it.
Maurizio, what do you think? Are there things that humans should always be the ones approving, always in the loop, always setting the boundaries, or or you think as we continue to improve the performance of agents and their autonomy, we're going to be able to hand more things over to them on this level 4 of automation? What are the things that you are comfortable saying, hey, this type of work, I'm okay handing off to an agent. Some of the work I think should always be with a human, and there always should be human eyes looking at it to make sure things are not broken and are not going to go wrong.
So from my perspective, and also considering the type of regulated environment that I work in, AI agent can detect vulnerabilities easily, can register the risk, no risk there for me, assign some sort of flow to the internal team, or it can send, like Kevin mentioned, the reminder about uncompleted training, security training. That's easy stuff, and I think the test line would be those type of things are easy to explain to the auditor, to the client, to the regulated sector, because there's really a very low risk involved. But when we have to do some sort of risk acceptance. So when we evaluating a new tool that is processing data, client sensitive special category of data, right? Or these are and we're talking about the acceptance of the risk. Then these sort of things would not be, I wouldn't be comfortable explaining the auditor that the AI agent approved this risk. The AI agent
Interesting.
was involved, can be involved in the actual assessment and gathering of data, okay, but the actual acceptance, the final decision, again, I think it's going to take, I think, quite a long time until the industry will get comfortable with the AI agents. Now I think we are in the very early stages of those AI agent deployments within various sectors, within various industries, where making those independent decisions in the regulated sectors possess a huge amount of risk, especially in the regulated sector. So audit sign-offs, again, vendor relationship, acceptance, risk, probably not ideal for AI agent at this moment. So that's my, I think,
Interesting.
the red line.
Yeah, I think you mentioned the operator's test, right? Would I be comfortable explaining to an auditor exactly what this agent did and why, right? If the answer is no, then you need more guardrails, right? And I think the through line here is really clear. Thrust isn't a feature that we're going to add to the platform. It's really the operating model, the operating principle you design your program around, right? And this brings us to our final question, which is your takeaways, right? I think we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about execution debt. We talked about this new maturity framework and what it actually takes to trust agents to do real work. And I want to close with each one of you, and I really would love for you to leave something to the attendees, something really concrete to the attendees. So I'll start with Kevin, and Kevin, what is one question GRC leaders should ask when evaluating whether a platform is really reducing their workload for their program? What do you think the GRC leader should be asking themselves if the platform is doing its job reducing workload?
Yeah, I think during the demos and trials, one thing they should focus on is not just is there some fancy dashboard that gives me a bunch of alerts, but are there actual recommendations that it's giving, or out of the box, are there workflows that are repeatable that every organization goes through that they have some sort of resolution for? I think that's the trend with security tools in general right now. No one wants more alerts because that just generates more work for you. But if you
More
can start
noise.
to see, yeah, more noise, exactly. But if the platform seems to focus on, we're actually not bombarding you with alerts, where some of them even say we're reducing the amount of alerts you get. And so through that,
Interesting.
you're kind of indirectly eliminating a bunch of work. And so even if they're not automating a process, they might be helping you to filter out some of the stuff you don't need to worry about at all. Like a good example is vulnerability management these days. A lot of tools will do things such as tell you, hey, this library is never loaded into production, so you don't have to treat it as a critical, right? That's a way of reducing some of that work without necessarily patching it for you. It's more saying like, you don't have to patch this just yet. You can wait a little longer.
Yeah, I think I used to call this alert issue like the noisy neighbor syndrome, right? Because you're always thinking about it, and you're seeing it in front of you, and it tugs at you, right? When you're doing other work that's not directly related to your GRC program, you start seeing alerts, and you just get really anxious. There's a level of anxiety that rises up because you're seeing all these alerts. So your point is really well taken here. Maurizio, what is one hard truth? You are working in a deeply regulated, I know it, I live it every day, right? I think because of email, I live it. I think I know way too much about compliance around email. You are living, in a really deeply regulated industry. What's one hard truth security and GRC leaders need to accept about how their current program is operating? What is some of like really, really hard truth that you would like to share with the audience?
I think the hard truth is that unfortunately having the platform, the GRC platform, does not mean that you have the great compliance program or you have the great level of maturity in your organization. And
Absolutely.
unfortunately, this is true. And like I think I mentioned that before. If you're working for a small startup, the GRC platform can take you almost all the way through. But if you're working for a large organization in the regulated sector, you unfortunately sometimes hit the wall, and there are dependencies around you. There are different regulations, different frameworks that you need to be aware of. You're losing track. You're not closing gaps, and you have that dependency problem. So, and it's a very hard truth because, from my experience, I lived that for one company that was scaling very fast, and at one point I felt like I can do great with the GRC platform, and I feel like my actions matter, and I'm making an impact. But then the company started growing, and I had that feeling that I'm losing control because I'm not closing the gaps. And then again, if I have always been involved with the clients and audits and due diligence, so my narrative had to change. Now that and now I need to actually explain to them that as the company grows, that there are more and more gaps, and those gaps are not shrinking, but they are expanding as the company grows. So that's the sometimes hard truth to accept for GRC leaders.
Absolutely. Russ, what's one trap teams should avoid when trying to make GRC more agent driven? What do you recommend people to think about?
Yeah, like look, I think the biggest trap that I see teams doing is trying to bolt on agents onto their existing GRC platforms and workflows without really rethinking how the work is actually being done. And whenever that happens, like when people layer on the automation on top of their existing dashboards and their existing tickets and so on, they just end up creating a faster system of record instead of like true system that drives outcomes and help companies get compliant, but also get prepared to the audit and accelerate that readiness. So what I see is that teams that are much more deliberate, teams that embed agents into real workflows, that define those guardrails, approvals, and all the trails, they're the teams that actually are able to take a real advantage of the AI at the stage where it is today compared to where it was several years ago, and move from that insight, however enriched with AI, to that like real follow through that is enabled by AI. Like that to me is the biggest trap, and I think the biggest opportunity as well.
Amazing. Ayush, bring us home. What are your thoughts about the evolution of platforms and the inclusion of agents, and agents performing work on behalf of teams? What are some of the traps that you recommend people think about as they are evaluating new solutions? What are your thoughts?
I think for me the biggest risk here is the error of omission and not the error of actually making a mistake. Right? So, for example, if there is a lot that can be unlocked using agents, and there is no doubt about it. Of course, the industry as a whole is learning how to build guardrails, how to add more provenance, how to add more auditability, how telemetry changes to adapt to a more agent-native era. But I think fear is the biggest enemy here because there is a lot of opportunity. So the limiting factor here is when people start thinking more about risks than opportunities, then the problem solving becomes very defensive, and that is a trap that we've seen companies fall into, uh, which I think obviously there is an evolution to it. But yeah, I think that for me is the biggest risk. Leaving money on the table,
I think the
letting go of the
innovators, I
opportunity
think you
and
go
thinking about the
through.
risks. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
go
there's
ahead.
the issue also, like what they call the innovator's dilemma, right? Everything that's new, everything that's pushing boundaries, you kind of think about selling, quote unquote, that vision across the enterprise, and you have to not live on fear, but really bring in this innovative approach that's going to challenge you to think differently, right? Those are fantastic thoughts. Really, thank you for these takeaways, and really, I hope everyone here that's watching the webinar is taking notes. And I'm going to move to Q&A. We have time for a couple of questions, so let's go on to Q&A. And let me see here. Give me 1 second to get to the Q&A. All right. So let's see. We have a couple of questions here. So I'll throw this one to Ross. So quickly, Ross, for a small team, uh, and what's a good first use case for agentic AI in GRC? What's kind of like low hanging fruit, something that somebody can start doing tomorrow?
I'm actually going to throw it over to Kevin. I think Kevin will
Hey,
have a very
Kevin,
good
I
perspective.
know.
I
Go ahead,
actually have
Kevin.
a
Answer
good
that
use
question,
case.
Kevin.
Yeah, for something that I think LLMs are good at right now, TPRM. And one thing that a lot of teams get overwhelmed with is they have all these SaaS vendors that their colleagues want to purchase, right? And so to some extent, you need to review some of these incoming vendors. It's very overwhelming. LLMs are pretty good at summarizing like a company's website. So if someone says, "Hey, I want to use this tool called Slack," you can ask ChatGPT or Claude, "Hey, summarize what Slack does at a very high level." And so from there, you can go, oh, this is something that all employees will use to talk to each other. That's pretty important. But then if the LLM summarizes, it says, hey, this thing is just something that you use to send swag to some of your prospects. Maybe it's not as big of a deal. So you can mentally think, I don't need to spend as much time evaluating this vendor. I think that's like a slam dunk use case right now. And uh, I can probably think of a few others, but I know we're running short on time.
Maurizio, just to wrap up, where do you think teams are expecting too much from AI in GRC right now? Do you think there's this oversized expectations, and should we kind of tone them down, or we are where we're supposed to be in regards to our expectations of what AI can deliver?
No, I think we should work towards the closing the gaps, the execution gap, and I think this I'm on the positive side. I don't like to think negatively about AI, even though that I have to, as long as I have to explain it, I'm able to explain it to the auditors and clients. I'm comfortable using and executing DI. My company, we have to. We have the governance, we have the procedures for how to actually implement AI systems internally, and there are, if the organization doesn't know how to do it, then the easiest way to implement any AI system for the regulated sector, at least, is to use the existing governance structures. Because for the regulated client, that's what they want to see, that the decision was made at the right level. They want to see that the senior management went through this. So if you have the change management process, you went through the security controls for this AI systems, that you went through data protection controls. So use the existing governance structures for the any AI systems that you want to deploy or implement. If you have no any other options.
And Marcio, I am fully
Got
in
it.
the
Well,
same campus. Yeah, I'm in the same campus, Morris. Here, I'm of a particularly optimistic disposition when it comes to this. Even if the glass is completely empty, I'm happy. You can put anything in it, right? So I mean, there's more opportunity than risk. So.
No. Listen, I'm an AI maximalist, so I'm with you. I'm with you. I really am optimistic as well. I truly believe in this human in the loop model, and I think the discussion really makes me hopeful that everybody understands that the issue really isn't visibility anymore. That the new issue is execution, and this shift to a system of action is really about giving everybody access to AI that handles the follow through with guardrails, so the accountability stays with you, right? I think that's crystal clear. Look, I want to thank everybody for participating. I want to thank everybody that joined us. Thank you so much, Ross, Maurizio, Kevin, and obviously Ayush, for a really great conversation. I'm going to send the recording, obviously, and the resources to everybody shortly. I want you to stay secured, stay compliant, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.